Have you ever noticed that the people who speak the least often leave the deepest impression? It's as if their silence carries more weight than the noise of 1,000 voices. Alan Watts once said that the meaning of life is just to be alive, yet most of us spend our days trying to prove that we are. We talk endlessly, explaining, defending, convincing, while those who speak little simply are. They don't need to fill the air to feel important. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's presence. But why do they choose silence when the world rewards those who speak louder? Is it shyness, or could it be wisdom? The kind that comes when you've stopped trying to control the flow of life. In this video, we'll explore the fascinating psychology behind people who don't talk too much, not through labels or diagnoses, but through the lens of awareness that Alan Watts spent his life teaching, the art of being at peace in a noisy world. In a world that worships noise, silence becomes rebellion. Most people speak not because they have something meaningful to say, but because they fear what might rise in the quiet. Alan Watts often said that the mind is like muddy water, it only becomes clear when still. Those who speak less, therefore, aren't avoiding life. They are letting it settle. They understand that silence is not emptiness, it's full of things words can't hold: intuition, understanding, and the soft pulse of awareness. They observe, absorb, and allow life to unfold without constantly trying to comment on it. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to feel yourself. You begin to hear the truth underneath the surface of things. This kind of quiet person doesn't need to compete for attention. They have discovered something most people overlook, that real strength doesn't shout. It simply stands still. In that stillness, they connect with something deeper than language. Their silence becomes a mirror where others can see their own restlessness reflected back at them, and because they listen more than they speak, they start to perceive layers others miss. They notice the hesitation in someone's tone, the truth behind a smile, the chaos hidden in constant chatter. Silence sharpens the senses. It becomes a form of awareness, a way of being fully alive without constantly narrating life. When the noise of the world fades, a strange clarity appears. They can finally hear the rhythm of their own existence, the soundless hum that Alan Watts described as the music of being. People who don't talk too much live closer to that music. They don't rush to fill the pauses. They live inside them. And this inner calm creates something magnetic. Others feel drawn to them, not because of what they say, but because of what they don't. Their energy feels grounded, present, and free of the anxious need to prove. In a society built on showing off, their silence feels sacred. The truth is, the quieter you become, the more you begin to understand, not through intellect, but through presence. The mind that rests, sees. The one that never stops talking, misses everything that can't be said. So the next time you meet someone who speaks little, remember, they may not be shy or distant. They might simply be tuned to a different frequency, one where peace is louder than words. After silence has settled, something deeper awakens: feeling. When you no longer rush to speak, you begin to notice how much emotion lies beneath every moment. Alan Watts believed that language often traps us inside concepts, while silence allows us to experience life directly. People who don't talk too much live closer to their senses. They don't label every emotion instantly. They let it breathe. They can sit with sadness without calling it a problem, or with joy without trying to capture it in words. Their awareness is open, fluid, like water flowing around stones instead of crashing against them. This emotional depth is not about drama. It's about sensitivity, the ability to feel life without filters. The chatter of the world tries to numb that sensitivity. It says, don't feel too much, don't think too deeply. But silence says the opposite. Stay, watch, feel everything. In this space, understanding grows naturally. They see that every person, even the loudest, is just trying to be understood. And by not talking too much, they stop competing for space. They create space. They become containers of presence where others feel safe to simply exist. Alan Watts once said, "You are the universe experiencing itself." When you stop talking, you begin to sense that truth. You can feel the pulse of life in your body, the hum of awareness behind your thoughts. You realize that silence isn't the absence of communication. It's communication in its purest form. If you feel ready to dive deeper into your own mind and balance both your light and shadow, explore the SIM Method ebook. It's a practical guide that helps you awaken your inner strength in just 5 minutes a day. The link is waiting for you in the first pinned comment. And this awareness changes how you relate to others. You start to notice how often people talk just to escape themselves. You see how words can be shields used to hide what we truly feel. But in silence, those shields fall. That's why quiet people often make others uncomfortable. Their stillness exposes what noise tries to cover. Yet, the beauty of it is this. Silence doesn't judge. It simply allows. It's the space where emotions transform instead of being suppressed. That's why people who don't talk too much often carry a mysterious calm. They've learned to let feelings pass through them instead of fighting them. Talking less, in truth, is not about withholding words. It's about allowing life to speak for itself. When you can sit with silence without panic, you discover that it's not empty, it's full of truth. And once you've felt that kind of depth, small talk loses its taste. Stillness then becomes a teacher. It shows that understanding doesn't need to be spoken, it can be felt. And those who live from that place become more compassionate, more awake, more real. Silence doesn't just make a person peaceful, it transforms the way they see. When words quiet down, perception expands. The mind, once filled with noise, begins to open like a window after a storm. Suddenly, things that went unnoticed become vivid. The pattern of sunlight on a wall, the rhythm of someone's breathing, the truth hiding in a glance, all of it reveals itself to the quiet observer. Alan Watts used to say that the universe is playing hide and seek with itself. The more you talk, the more you identify with the seeker, the one always chasing meaning, forcing understanding, labeling everything. But when you fall into silence, you become the witness, the one who sees without the need to define. And that shift changes everything. People who don't talk too much tend to watch more deeply. They don't rush to judgment or try to control what happens. They let the moment unfold. In a conversation, while others are thinking of what to say next, they are actually listening. Listening not just to words, but to energy, to what isn't being said. That's why they often sense lies without proof and truths without explanation. Their calm is not passivity, it's awareness. It's the mind functioning as it was meant to, not as a frantic commentator, but as an instrument of perception. The silent person moves through life like a mirror. They reflect reality instead of distorting it with opinion. They can sit in a crowd and feel the mood of the room before a single word is spoken. They can detect tension behind laughter, sincerity behind hesitation. It's not magic. It's the natural intelligence of a quiet mind. This awareness can feel lonely sometimes because once you start seeing clearly, you realize how rarely others do. The world is filled with people shouting their opinions, defending ideas they don't even understand. Noise becomes a shield against reality, but those who talk less have given up that shield. They prefer clarity over comfort. And clarity has a strange power. It gives them the ability to see through illusion, both their own and others. They can tell when someone's confidence is actually insecurity, when someone's anger is really pain. That's why silence often feels intimidating. It reveals. People fear being seen by someone who doesn't fill the air with words because silence creates space for truth to echo back. Alan Watts once described awareness as a spotlight with no one holding it. The quiet person lives under that light, not analyzing but observing. When your mind isn't crowded, life becomes more vivid. You start to taste food differently, to hear music in everyday sounds, to sense harmony even in chaos. What others call boring, the quiet mind calls alive. And here lies the paradox. Those who speak less often understand more. Because understanding isn't built from information, it grows from presence. You can read 1,000 books and still miss what the silence of one sunset can teach you. Quiet people learn from moments, not from noise. They understand without dissecting, they connect without explaining. Their mind, instead of being filled, becomes clear. When Alan Watts spoke about the art of letting go, he didn't mean withdrawal from life. He meant letting go of the compulsion to grasp, to define, to argue. Silence is that art in motion. It's the ability to be with what is, without trying to control it. And in that acceptance, life stops being something to figure out and starts being something to experience. The calm mind sees what others miss, because it's not distracted by the need to understand. It just watches. And that simple act of pure attention is one of the highest forms of intelligence. There comes a moment when silence stops being a choice. It becomes a state of being. Not the silence of fear or avoidance, but the silence of strength. Alan Watts often reminded us that trying to control the world is like trying to smooth the water with a flat iron. You'll only make more waves. Those who don't talk too much have stopped trying to iron life flat. They've learned to float. This kind of silence has nothing to do with weakness. In fact, it's born from confrontation, from the countless times they've spoken, argued, tried to explain themselves, and realized it changes nothing. At some point, they discovered that peace isn't found in convincing others, but in understanding themselves. That's the moment silence turns into power. A person who no longer reacts to every provocation is not indifferent. They're free. The world can throw chaos their way, and they don't flinch. They know that losing your calm means losing your center. They've learned that most conflicts die, not through resistance, but through non-participation. Like Alan Watts said, to hold your breath is to lose it. Silence allows the breath of life to keep flowing, naturally, effortlessly. When you talk less, you conserve energy. Words are currency, and most people spend them carelessly. But the quiet ones have realized that silence multiplies value. Their words, when spoken, carry weight because they come from stillness, not reaction. They don't speak to fill emptiness. They speak to express clarity. And when they do, people listen because silence gave their voice meaning. Strength in silence is also emotional. It's the courage to sit with discomfort without running from it. To observe anger without letting it turn into destruction. To feel sadness without making it a story. Alan Watts believed that the key to freedom is to stop resisting what is. The quiet person embodies that wisdom. They don't fight life. They flow with it. But that doesn't mean they're detached or cold. On the contrary, their quietness hides a warm understanding that doesn't need to be spoken. When others lose control, they remain grounded. They can comfort without advice, guide without words, and heal simply by being present. Their silence becomes a safe space in a world full of noise, and that's why people often misjudge them. Society glorifies loudness, the outspoken, the bold, the ones who dominate the room. Yet real power rarely needs to announce itself. The mountain doesn't shout to prove its height. The ocean doesn't roar to prove its depth. In the same way, the silent person doesn't need recognition to know their worth. Their silence is not absence, it's mastery. They've stopped playing the game of noise because they've realized the only thing worth mastering is the self. And when you master silence, you master your energy, your peace, your focus. It takes strength to remain quiet when the world expects reaction. It takes wisdom to pause before speaking, and even greater wisdom to know when not to. Because silence is not the lack of response. It's the most powerful response of all. And once you understand that, you begin to feel a strange sense of freedom, a peace that doesn't depend on what others say or think. The storm may rage outside, but within, there's stillness. That's the power Alan Watts hinted at, the freedom of not needing to control the flow, but to dance with it. There's something fascinating about people who speak little, a quiet magnetism that words can't describe. You feel it the moment they enter a room, an invisible gravity, as if they carry a depth that others can sense but not define. Alan Watts often spoke of the illusion of separateness, how we are all waves of the same ocean, each expressing itself differently. And maybe that's what we feel around silent people, the stillness of the ocean itself, not just another wave. Their presence feels mysterious because they have stopped living on the surface. Most of us swim in noise, constantly defining, explaining, asserting who we are, but those who don't talk too much have sunk deeper. They exist below the surface where stillness reigns. That stillness doesn't need recognition. It just is. And that's what makes them so magnetic. They reflect a peace that others long for but rarely find. When someone is truly present without noise, their energy speaks louder than their voice ever could. Alan Watts once said that words can be like the rustling of leaves when there's no wind, meaningless movement. Quiet people understand that. They prefer authenticity to sound. When they speak, it's because something real has moved inside them. Not because they need to fill a silence that others find uncomfortable, but this presence didn't come easily. It's born from confrontation. From the countless moments when they realize that talking doesn't always mean connecting. They've seen how words can separate more than unite. They've learned that silence, when filled with awareness, can create an understanding deeper than any explanation. Their mystery, therefore, isn't an act. It's the natural result of alignment. They no longer chase validation through conversation. They embody it through energy. They've learned that real connection begins when words end. That's why people often feel calm or even exposed in their company. The quiet person doesn't project. They receive. They listen with the whole being, and that kind of attention is rare, almost sacred. Watts once compared life to music. It's not about reaching the end, but enjoying the rhythm. The quiet person has learned to live in rhythm with life, not in resistance to it. While others rush to explain the melody, they just listen. They don't try to label every experience. They let it play. And that ability to simply be gives them an aura that others instinctively trust. There's another reason for their mystery. They don't reveal everything, not because they're secretive, but because they understand the value of inner space. In silence, they've discovered that not everything needs to be shared to be real. Some thoughts are like sacred gardens. They bloom best when protected from noise. And this self-containment gives them power. When you don't need to constantly reveal your thoughts, you conserve energy. You become less predictable, less manipulable. People who talk too much give away their emotional map. The quiet keep theirs sacred. They understand that mystery isn't deception, it's protection. It keeps the sacred within you safe from the chaos outside. Yet their silence is not cold. It's full of empathy. Because when you stop speaking, you start feeling the world. You begin to perceive how heavy noise can be, how often people talk to escape pain. And that understanding makes you gentle. You no longer judge the loudness of others. You just see it for what it is, a cry for connection. That's why many quiet souls carry compassion behind their calm eyes. They've felt everything but learned not to react to it. Their presence then becomes medicine. In a loud world, they remind us of what peace feels like. In their stillness, others remember their own forgotten silence. that place inside where thoughts stop fighting and being becomes enough. Alan Watts once said that you are something the whole universe is doing, in the same way a wave is something the whole ocean is doing. The quiet person embodies this realization. They don't see themselves as separate from life. They flow with it. That's why their presence feels mysterious yet familiar. They remind us of something ancient within us, the awareness that doesn't need to speak to know. And maybe that's the ultimate secret. Their silence connects us not just to them, but to ourselves. In their company, the noise within us settles. Our own restless thoughts quiet down. We start to feel again, because silence, when shared, multiplies. It spreads like calm water, dissolving tension, awakening depth. That's why their mystery is not a mask. It's revelation. It shows that words are optional when presence is real. It reveals that the truest form of communication doesn't come from the mouth, but from the space between hearts. When Alan Watts spoke about the music of life, he hinted at this kind of harmony, the one you don't need to explain. Quiet people live in tune with that music. They don't interrupt the song with endless commentary. They let it play through them. That's why you remember their presence long after they've left, because what they awaken in you is not memory, but silence itself. At some point in the journey, silence stops being just a habit. It becomes a way of being, a mirror in which truth finally recognizes itself. Alan Watts often said that we are the universe looking at itself, and those who speak little have begun to see that directly. Through the absence of noise, they've stumbled upon something far greater than personality, awareness itself. In silence, the illusion of separation fades. Without the constant narrative of me and you, mine and theirs, life reveals its unity. People who don't talk too much are not escaping the world, they are merging with it. They've realized that everything we try to describe in words, love, peace, God, the self, already exists beyond language. The more we try to talk about it, the further we drift from it. But in the quiet, it's there, obvious, simple, alive. That's why silence at its highest form isn't emptiness, it's fullness. It's not the absence of thought, but the presence of awareness. And that awareness is what's called the eternal now. When you stop trying to name the moment, you start living it. When the chatter stops, even for a few seconds, something astonishing happens. You realize you were never separate from anything. You are not observing life. You are life observing itself. This realization can't be explained, only felt. That's why those who speak less often look calm, sometimes even detached. They've tasted something ineffable, a peace that words can't capture. They've discovered that silence is not a tool, it's truth. It's the original language of the universe before the first word was ever spoken. And this changes everything. The need to argue, to prove, to impress, it all falls away. Because the moment you see that everything is already whole, the desire to fix or control it disappears. You realize that every sound, every silence, every joy, and every pain is part of the same dance. The quiet person dances with life instead of trying to lead it. Their steps are soft, but their awareness is vast. Alan Watts compared it to watching a flame. If you try to hold it, you burn yourself. If you simply watch it, it lights the room. Silence teaches the same lesson. When you stop grasping for meaning, you begin to see meaning everywhere. The tree, the breath, the pause between two thoughts, all of it shines with the same sacred presence. The person who doesn't talk too much isn't disconnected. They are connected to everything. But reaching that state isn't easy. It comes through disillusionment, through seeing how words often separate us from truth. The quiet ones have learned through experience that explaining love isn't the same as feeling it, that describing peace isn't the same as being it. They've grown tired of noise that pretends to be wisdom. They'd rather live in truth than talk about it. Their silence becomes an act of honesty. It says, I don't need to describe what already is. And that humility is the doorway to enlightenment. Because enlightenment isn't about knowing more. It's about unknowing everything that isn't real. Watt said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The quiet person understands that. They no longer chase identity through conversation or validation. They've made peace with not knowing, and that peace becomes illumination. The more you let go, the lighter you become. The more you stop talking about life, the more alive you feel. This is the paradox that noise can never understand. When you stop trying to prove your existence, you finally feel it. Silence reveals what sound hides, the effortless miracle of being. Every breath, every heartbeat, every flicker of consciousness becomes sacred. There's no need to search anymore, because the seeker has dissolved into the seeing. And that's what true presence is. It's not detachment, it's intimacy. It's being so close to life that the distance between observer and observed disappears. That's why those who don't talk too much often seem to move differently, slower, softer, but with purpose. They're not rushing to the next thing. They're fully inside this one. Their stillness isn't laziness, it's awareness at rest. You can feel it when they look at you. Their gaze doesn't judge or analyze, it simply sees. And in that seeing, something inside you relaxes. You sense that they're not waiting to reply. They're just there, fully. Their silence gives you permission to drop your masks, to stop performing. For a moment, the space between two souls becomes wide enough for truth to breathe. That is the hidden enlightenment of silence, not floating above life, but falling completely into it. Not escaping, but embracing. Not denying emotion, but feeling it so deeply that no words are needed. And once you taste that silence, you begin to understand why Alan Watts called life a dance rather than a journey. There's nowhere to go, nothing to achieve, only the rhythm to follow. The quiet person has learned to sway with that rhythm. They don't rush the beat, they let it move through them. And that is why they seem at peace. They are no longer fighting the tempo of existence. So when you meet someone who speaks little, don't mistake their silence for emptiness. See it for what it truly is, awareness in motion. It's not that they have nothing to say, it's that they no longer need to say everything. Their silence isn't lack, it's mastery. It's the space where life reveals itself as enough. In a world where everyone wants to be heard, they have chosen to listen, not just to others, but to the universe itself. And that listening becomes their enlightenment. Because in the end, wisdom is not about speaking profound truths, it's about living them quietly. Alan Watts believed that silence was not the opposite of sound, but its foundation. Without silence, no music could exist. It would just be noise. The same is true for us. Without moments of quiet, our lives lose meaning. Words become empty, movement becomes frantic, and thought becomes a cage. Silence gives shape to everything. It's the invisible rhythm that holds the world together. So maybe that's the real psychology of people who don't talk too much. They have found harmony with life itself. They don't resist the silence. They are the silence. And in that, they've touched what every seeker is searching for, the peace that doesn't need to be spoken.